I'm Emily. I'm 34 years old, and this is the story of how my husband sold my car behind my back to fund his mistress. So I sold his house instead. The day I handed over the keys to his precious family home, the look on his face was worth every single sleepless night I'd spent planning. He was standing on the driveway, jaw hanging open, clutching a cup of coffee like it was the only thing keeping him upright. The buyers smiled politely at him as they walked past with the realtor, while I stood there calm, holding a folder of signed documents. He kept looking at me as if waiting for me to laugh and say it was a joke, but I didn't. Instead, I just said, "Consider this the down payment on my dignity." 2 months earlier, I didn't think I was the kind of woman who would ever get involved in something like this. I was the one who played by the rules. I paid my bills on time, I cooked dinner, I kept the house warm, and I never thought my marriage was the kind of thing you'd see on some messy online forum. But life has a way of changing the script without warning, and apparently, so does a husband who thinks he's clever. Back then, my car was more than just a car. It was the thing I bought with my own money after years of driving beat-up junkers. A silver sedan with just enough luxury features to make me feel like I'd finally arrived somewhere in life. Heated seats, smooth ride, no weird noises. It was mine, in every sense. I used it to commute, run errands, and escape to the countryside on weekends when I needed to breathe. I babied that car, and my husband knew it. It started with something small, as it always does. One Saturday morning, I went to take the car out for groceries and found the gas tank almost empty. I hadn't driven it in 3 days. When I asked him about it, he casually said he'd borrowed it because his truck was acting up. I didn't think much of it. We were married, after all. Sharing was part of the deal. But then it happened again. And again. Sometimes I'd find little crumbs in the passenger seat, or the seat settings changed like someone else had been driving. It was irritating, but I brushed it off. Until one evening, I went out to the driveway, and my car was just gone. Not parked on the street gone. Not I forgot I lent it to him gone. Just gone. When I asked him, he avoided eye contact and mumbled something about it being in the shop. No big deal, right? Except when I called the shop we usually used, they said they hadn't seen my car in months. That's when my stomach dropped. I didn't confront him right away. Instead, I pretended I believed him. And that's when I started noticing other things. He'd come home later than usual, smelling faintly of perfume that definitely wasn't mine. His phone, which he used to leave lying around, suddenly became glued to him. He'd take it into the bathroom, into the garage, anywhere I wasn't. One night, I overheard him in the kitchen talking on the phone. His voice was low, but the tone was different, softer, almost rehearsed. He was saying something about helping her out and getting the money sorted. I stood there in the dark hallway, my heart pounding. The next day, I checked our joint bank account. That's when I saw a wire transfer for a suspiciously large sum. A little digging showed it matched almost exactly the value of my car. I felt sick. The betrayal wasn't just about the car. It was about what the sale represented. That he could take something that was mine, something I'd worked for, without asking, and give it to someone else. And not just anyone else, a mistress. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I didn't even cry. Not yet. I just felt this icy clarity settle over me. The kind you get when you know the rules have changed and you're not playing the same game anymore. For a week, I tested him. I asked casual questions, offered opportunities for him to come clean. Each time he lied with the same ease as breathing. It wasn't until I accidentally mentioned the shop had called me about my car, a complete fabrication, that I saw the flicker of panic in his eyes. He covered it quickly, but it was there.
That's when I knew he wasn't just dishonest. He thought I was stupid. And there's something dangerous about a woman you've underestimated for too long. So I started quietly pulling records, car title history, bank statements, even a few text message screenshots I managed to get when he left his phone unlocked one night. What I found didn't just confirm my suspicions, it made my blood boil. He'd sold my car to some guy he knew through a friend of a friend and handed the cash straight to her. In one text, she even joked about buying something sexy to ride in. That was the moment my sadness burned away and turned into resolve. If he wanted to play this game, I'd play it better. And unlike him, I'd make sure it was all by the book.
I didn't move right away. Revenge, I knew, wasn't something you rushed if you wanted it to stick. Instead, I went quiet. I smiled when he walked in the door, made him dinner, asked about his day. All the while, I was building my case like a prosecutor preparing for trial. Every receipt, every screenshot, every call log, all neatly organized in a binder I kept tucked inside an old laptop box in my closet. He never noticed. He never noticed anything unless it directly served him. The first escalation came about 2 weeks later. I'd been using his truck since my car was gone, and one morning, the keys were nowhere to be found. When I asked, he shrugged and said, "Oh, I lent it to a buddy. Just grab an Uber." That buddy was, of course, her. I found out because I saw a picture of her on social media that same day, leaning against the truck like it was hers, captioned with, "Love my new ride." It was the first time I felt the urge to just pack my bags and leave, without saying a word. But I wasn't done yet. The second escalation came in the form of money disappearing from our savings. Not huge chunks at first, just a few hundred here and there. But I tracked every withdrawal and noticed a pattern. The cash was coming out right before weekends, when he'd go help a friend fix something or visit his cousin out of town. Every lie was sloppy, but just believable enough that he thought he was safe. Then came the overreach moment. The one where he went from being a selfish liar to openly disrespecting me. He had the audacity to suggest that we downsize to free up more money. By downsize, he meant selling my grandmother's small cottage, which she'd left me in her will. It wasn't worth a fortune, but it was sentimental. And it was mine. One of the last connections I had to her. He claimed it was just sitting there and could help us both out. The way he said us made my skin crawl. I told him I'd think about it. What I really thought was that he had no idea what was about to hit him. I tried one last peace attempt, partly because I wanted to be sure I'd exhausted the reasonable options, and partly because I wanted it on record if this ever came up in court. I sat him down and told him I knew about the car, the money, and the other woman. I told him that if he ended it, came clean, and worked with me to fix the financial mess, I'd be willing to try counseling. I even gave him 3 days to decide. His answer? He laughed. Actually laughed. Said I was overreacting and that maybe if you weren't so boring, I wouldn't need to look elsewhere. That line went into the binder too, word for word. That was it. The last little thread holding back the tidal wave inside me snapped. From that moment on, I wasn't his wife in the emotional sense. I was his opponent, and I was going to beat him at his own game, except my victory would be airtight and legal. The first thing I did was quietly meet with a lawyer. I explained the situation, handed over my binder, and asked what my options were. He looked through it and said, "You've got more than enough here to protect yourself and to make a move he won't see coming." That's when the plan started to form.
I learned something important in that meeting. The house, his precious family home, was actually in both our names. We'd bought it together, but he'd always treated it like it was his alone, because it had been in his family for years before we renovated it. The truth was, the mortgage and deed said otherwise, which meant I had just as much right to sell it as he did. But selling a house isn't as simple as sticking a sign in the yard. I needed leverage. So I started tracking every late payment, every time he failed to contribute to the mortgage, and every bit of evidence that showed I was the one who truly owned the upkeep. By the time I was done, I could paint a picture to any buyer or judge that I was the one who truly owned the upkeep. The second step was finding a buyer discreetly. A friend of mine works in real estate, and when I told her what I was planning, she raised an eyebrow and said, "You're not messing around." She agreed to help me as long as everything stayed above board. I told her I wanted the sale quick, clean, and in cash if possible. Meanwhile, I kept acting normal at home. He still thought I was too emotional to make a move. I played into it. I'd even ask about his friend with a sweet, fake curiosity, watching him stumble over his lies. All the while, I was moving certain documents into a safe deposit box and quietly packing up my most valuable belongings from the house: jewelry, important papers, a few family heirlooms. He never noticed any of it. Every night before bed, I'd go over the plan like it was a script. Step 1, finalize the listing. Step 2, accept the offer. Step 3, close the sale on a day he thought he'd be out of town. The timing would be perfect. And when it happened, it would be fast. By the time my friend found a serious buyer, I was ready. We arranged the closing date for a Friday morning, a day I knew he'd be gone until the afternoon. I could already see it in my head. Him pulling into the driveway, seeing strangers moving into his house, and realizing that for the first time in our marriage, I'd made a move without him, and I'd beaten him at his own game.
The week before closing, everything moved into high gear. I kept my phone close at all times, constantly checking messages from my real estate friend, the title company, and my lawyer. Every step was documented, every signature timestamped. I wasn't leaving a single opening for him to undo this once the papers were signed. My lawyer even had me send a certified letter to our shared address, yes, the same house we both lived in, notifying him of the pending sale. Legally, that counted as notice. I sent it on a Tuesday morning when I knew he'd already left for work, and when the envelope arrived 2 days later, I intercepted it from the mailbox and placed it neatly on the kitchen counter. When he came home that evening, I was chopping vegetables for dinner. He glanced at the envelope, muttered something about junk mail, and tossed it aside without opening it. My heart nearly burst from holding back a laugh. He'd just ignored the one piece of paper that could have given him a fighting chance to interfere. That moment became the mental snapshot I carried with me all week, a little secret victory I savored while he strutted around like the king of nothing. Still, I didn't let my guard down. The night before closing, I walked through the house room by room. I took photos of everything. Not for sentimental reasons, but for records. If he tried to claim later that I'd trashed the place or taken things that were his, I'd have evidence of the condition I left it in. The refrigerator was stocked, the bathrooms clean, even the bed made. I wanted every detail to scream professional and deliberate, not emotional or petty. That same night, I moved the last of my personal items into a storage unit under my name only. I paid the first 6 months in advance, so there'd be no paper trail leading back to our joint accounts. By the time I was done, my half of the closet looked a little sparse, but he'd been so wrapped up in his side project, the other woman,
that I doubted he'd notice if I moved out entirely. Friday morning arrived crisp and sunny, as if the weather itself approved of my plan. I dressed in something simple but sharp: black blazer, clean jeans, ankle boots. The kind of outfit that says, competent without trying too hard. I met my friend and my lawyer at the title company's office at 9 a.m. sharp. The buyer, a middle-aged woman with a firm handshake and a no-nonsense expression, was already there. We went over the paperwork line by line. I initialed and signed every page without hesitation. When the final document slid across the table, I paused for just a second, letting the weight of the moment sink in. Then I signed my name in clear, steady letters. It was done. Just like that. The house was no longer ours, or his. It was hers. Legally, irrevocably, completely. The funds hit my separate account within the hour. I could have left it at that. I could have let him come home to an empty house and a key that no longer fit the front door. But no, I wanted him to see the moment it all changed. So I called the buyer and asked if she'd be comfortable meeting at the property for the key handoff that afternoon. She agreed, curious but amused when I hinted there might be a reaction worth witnessing. Around 2 o'clock, I drove to the house. The buyer and her realtor were already there, walking through the front yard. A moving van idled at the curb, ready to unload. I parked across the street and leaned casually against my car, arms folded as if I were just a neighbor watching the action. Right on cue, his truck turned the corner. He slowed when he saw the van, confusion knitting his brow. Then he saw me. He pulled into the driveway and got out, looking around like he'd stumbled into someone else's life by mistake. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice somewhere between angry and bewildered. I smiled, calm as a lake. "This is the new owner. I just sold the house." For a second, he didn't react. Then it hit him all at once. The van, the strangers, the fact that the locks would be changed before nightfall. He stepped toward me, his voice rising. "You can't do that." "Oh, I can," I said, pulling the folder from under my arm. I flipped it open to the closing documents, complete with signatures and the deed transfer. "It's all legal. You got the notice, you ignored it. That's on you." His face went pale, then red. The buyer, bless her heart, stepped forward and introduced herself, like we were at some kind of polite garden party. "We're excited to move in. I think it's going to be perfect for my family." She said it with a tone that made it clear he was no longer part of the equation. He stood there frozen as the movers started unloading boxes. I took one last look at him, tucked the folder back under my arm, and said, "Consider this my way of getting back what you took from me." Then I walked away without looking back. That night, I slept better than I had in months. But the fallout, was just getting started.
The fallout began almost immediately. By Saturday morning, my phone was lighting up like a slot machine with missed calls, voicemails, and a barrage of text messages that swung wildly between begging and screaming. One read, "We need to talk. I can fix this." Another just said, "You evil," followed by a word I won't repeat here. I didn't respond to any of them. Silence, I decided, would be my sharpest weapon now. Around mid-morning, I got a call from my lawyer. Apparently, my now ex-husband had already tried to file some sort of emergency motion to reverse the sale. It was denied within hours. The deed had transferred, the money was in my account, and every legal step had been followed to the letter. The judge's words were short and sweet. "This matter is closed." Later that day, I stopped by the storage unit to drop off a few more boxes and grab some clean clothes.
My lawyer had advised me to stay somewhere secure for the time being, so I'd rented a small furnished apartment in a neighboring town. It wasn't glamorous, but it was peaceful. More importantly, it was mine. No shared keys, no joint accounts, no lingering scent of his cologne in the hallway. By Monday, the story had spread, not because I told anyone, but because he couldn't keep his temper in check. He'd gone around to his family and mutual friends, ranting about how I'd stolen his house. The problem with his version was that it didn't hold up under scrutiny. More than one person reached out to me privately asking for my side. I sent them a single message. It's all legal, and I have the paperwork to prove it. I didn't need to say more. People can connect the dots when they want to. 2 days later, I ran into one of his cousins at the grocery store. She lowered her voice and said, "You know, he's been living at that woman's apartment, but they've been fighting nonstop since you sold the house." Apparently, my little act of property redistribution had not gone over well with her. Rumor had it she'd been counting on moving into the house herself. When that didn't happen, the shine of their little fling began to wear off fast. Meanwhile, I set about making smart moves with the money from the sale. After paying off a few lingering debts, I opened a separate savings account under my name only and put the majority into a high-yield account. My lawyer and I also began divorce proceedings. Not the messy, drawn-out kind he probably wanted, but the kind where every asset had been accounted for and every loophole had been tied shut before the papers even hit his hands. The best part? He couldn't touch a penny of the proceeds from the house. I'd structured the sale so that the funds were considered reimbursement for my documented contributions, mortgage payments, repairs, maintenance, all supported by receipts and bank statements. Every dollar was accounted for, and every dollar was mine. It took about 2 weeks for him to realize that the usual tactics, yelling, guilt-tripping, playing the victim, weren't going to work this time. I'd blocked him on everything except email, which my lawyer monitored for anything necessary. He tried sending a dramatic letter through his attorney about how the house had sentimental value to his family and how I'd destroyed years of heritage. My lawyer's response was a single page that read, "Our client acted within her full legal rights. Please direct further communication to this office." And here's where things got delicious. A mutual friend sent me a screenshot from social media. The other woman had posted a long, cryptic rant about men who can't provide and women who ruin everything out of jealousy. The comment section was brutal. People asking her if she was talking about that married guy and how maybe she should have thought twice before helping him sell his wife's car. She deleted the post within hours, but not before it made the rounds in our social circle. One evening, while sipping tea in my new apartment, I got a text from my real estate friend. "You should see the house now. The new owner repainted the whole place. It doesn't even look like his anymore." That was the moment it really sunk in. I hadn't just taken back what he owed me, I'd erased his claim on something he thought was untouchable. Weeks turned into a month, and I watched from a safe, quiet distance as his life unraveled in small, satisfying ways. He lost the truck, repossessed after he stopped making payments. The other woman apparently moved out, taking whatever she could fit into her car. Word was he was couch surfing with friends, none of whom seemed particularly thrilled to have him around. The final nail in the coffin came during the divorce mediation. Sitting across from me, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him, he signed the papers without much of a fight. Maybe he knew there was nothing left to take, or maybe he finally realized I wasn't the quiet, forgiving wife he'd always assumed I'd be. As I walked out of that mediation room, papers in hand, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I'd won, though let's be honest, I had, but because I'd reclaimed my peace, and you can't put a price on that.
The weeks after the divorce felt strangely quiet, almost unnervingly so. For months, my life had been a storm of secrets, planning, and careful execution. Now there was just space. Space to breathe, space to think, and space to finally decide what I wanted my life to look like without him taking up all the oxygen in the room. I started small. I bought myself a used SUV, nothing flashy, but reliable and roomy enough for weekend getaways. This time, the title was in my name only, stored safely in my lockbox. I joined a local hiking group, partly for the exercise, partly to meet new people who had no idea who I'd been married to. For the first time in years, I didn't have to explain myself or make excuses for someone else's behavior. But even as I was moving forward, the echoes of what happened still reached me. Mutual acquaintances would occasionally drop little updates about him without me asking. Apparently, his luck hadn't improved. He'd burned bridges with several friends by overstaying his welcome on their couches. His job, the one he used to brag about endlessly, had let him go after too many personal emergencies and unexplained absences. The other woman, gone. Rumor had it she left town entirely. One afternoon, I ran into his aunt at the farmer's market. She looked tired but kind, and after a brief hello, she said quietly, "I'm sorry for how he treated you. We all saw it, but no one wanted to get involved. You deserved better." It wasn't an apology on his behalf, but it was a small balm I hadn't realized I needed. I just smiled and said, "I know." By then, the money from the house was still sitting in my account, largely untouched. I'd been careful, not rushing to spend it on anything impulsive. My lawyer had reminded me more than once, "This is your safety net. Use it to build something, not just to patch holes." So I had rolled in a few online courses I'd been eyeing for years, the kind that could help me pivot into a new career. If there was one thing the last year had taught me, it was that relying too much on someone else's stability was a dangerous gamble. About 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I got one last email from him. No subject line, just a single sentence. "I hope you're happy with yourself." I stared at it for a moment, then closed my laptop without replying. The truth was, I was happy with myself, not because of what I'd done to him, but because of what I'd done for me. The emotional arc of it all was strange. The betrayal had started as a wound, then hardened into resolution, then burned into action. Now it had cooled into something quieter, steadier. I didn't walk around gloating or replaying the revenge in my head, though, yes, I did occasionally smile when I thought about his face on the driveway that day. Mostly, I felt free. I began to notice how much mental space I'd gained. No more checking his phone when he wasn't looking, no more rehearsing conversations in my head to avoid setting off his temper, no more making myself small so he could feel big. That absence of constant tension was worth more than the house, the car, or any of it. Of course, people still ask me if I'd do it again. If, given the choice, I'd go through the same steps to sell the house out under him. My answer is always the same. Absolutely, but only because I did it the right way. The legality of it all was my shield. I never had to hide in the shadows or worry about a courtroom ambush. That's what made the victory clean. And the moral? It's simple. When someone underestimates you, they expect you to either crumble or lash out recklessly. They never expect you to get calm, get smart, and get documented. That's the part that blindsides them. A few months ago, I drove past the old house for the first time since the sale. It looked different. Fresh paint, new landscaping, a swing set in the yard.
Kids' laughter drifted through the open windows. It didn't feel like his house anymore. It felt like a chapter in a book I'd finished and put back on the shelf. As I drove away, I realized that my revenge had never really been about punishing him. It was about restoring balance, about taking back what he thought he could take from me without consequence. And in that sense, the day I handed over those keys wasn't just the end of our marriage, it was the beginning of my life without him in it at all.
I stayed on the couch all night, staring at the ceiling. I could hear Mark moving around upstairs, probably packing a bag to leave before I woke up. I didn't care. I didn't even cry anymore. It was like my tears had dried up, replaced by this cold, steady fire inside me. By morning, he was gone. No note, no explanation, just an empty space where his things used to be, and the faint smell of his cologne lingering in the air. I made myself a coffee, sat by the window, and thought about what to do next. There was no going back, not after this. He had shown me exactly who he was, and now it was my turn to show him exactly who I could be. I pulled out my phone and called my lawyer. She'd been a friend of my mother's for years, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Elaine. When I told her everything, she didn't even sound surprised. "Come in this afternoon," she said. "Bring every piece of paperwork you can find. We're going to make sure he regrets ever thinking he could walk over you." Those words stuck with me all day. Regret. That was the feeling I wanted him to have every time he thought about me. At Elaine's office, she laid out the plan. Because my name was the only one on the deed to the house, something I'd fought for years ago when we bought it, Mark had no legal claim to it. He couldn't stop me from selling it. The irony made me laugh. He'd sold my car behind my back, but the house? That was mine to do with as I pleased, and I knew exactly what I was going to do. The next week was a blur of phone calls, paperwork, and silent satisfaction. I put the house on the market at a competitive price, and within days, I had a serious buyer. Mark had been staying at a friend's place since he left, but when he found out I was selling, he came storming over. "You can't do this," he shouted in the driveway, his face red with rage. I just smiled and handed him a copy of the property deed. "It's already done, just like you were already done the moment you betrayed me." The sale went through faster than I expected. On the day I handed over the keys to the new owner, I felt a strange sense of freedom. Not sadness, not nostalgia, just freedom. I'd taken control back, and it felt better than I'd imagined. Mark called me one last time, probably to beg or threaten, but I didn't answer. I blocked his number and walked away from that chapter of my life without looking back. We were at the part where you were deeply into the experience, almost forgetting that this was the final night. And then something changed. You heard footsteps in the hallway. They were slow, measured, and deliberate, as if someone was making sure you heard them. At first, you thought it was just your imagination playing tricks again, but the sound grew clearer. The boards of the old floor creaked with each step. The rhythm of the footsteps matched the pace of your heartbeat. You froze, every muscle tense, eyes fixed on the door. The handle moved, just a little, a slow, almost testing twist, like whoever was on the other side wasn't sure whether to enter or not. You felt a rush of adrenaline. Your phone was still in your hand, but you didn't dare make a sound. The room felt heavier, as if the air had turned thick. The smell of the old wood and something faintly metallic filled your nose. You thought of all the stories you'd heard, about visitors who stayed here and saw someone standing in their doorway in the middle of the night watching them. Then the handle stopped moving. Silence. The footsteps began again, but this time they moved away, disappearing into the distance until there was nothing but the faint hum of the air vent. You exhaled, not realizing you had been holding your breath. You sat up, staring at the door, part of you wanting to rush over and lock it, another too afraid to get that close. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. It was hard to tell.
And just when you thought the night might end quietly, there was a whisper. Not from outside, not